Bom tarde, Aquaba. Welcome. Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. We hope that you are at your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual strength today, and that you are well or fast arriving at being very well. We're so happy that you can join us here for this Our Ancestors Voices program, a program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And today's topic, the political strategy behind the Black on Black crime narrative. The political strategy behind the Black on Black crime narrative. And before we start, I have to correct one thing that I said last week. We here at the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we constantly strive to bring honesty and integrity to everything that we do. We feel that that's a major component that's lacking in today's world. So part of that with our internal structure and our criticism, self-criticism, is we really practice, you all, and we learn to acknowledge when we make mistakes and not see them as a tearing down of our character, but as an opportunity for us to become better people. So last week, I mistakenly said that Madame Andre Touré, the wonderful organizer for the Democratic Party of Guinea, our sibling Pan-African party in Guinea-Conakry, West Africa, had made her physical transition. And one of our trusted comrades, notified me after the show and was like, yes, she's still alive, comrade. And I just made an error. So I certainly apologize deeply for making that error. And I'm glad to have made that error because Madame Touré is a wonderful inspiration for us. So we hope that she lives another 150 years contributing to our people's struggle for our Chimaranga. So I apologize for that. And with that, we will get started. We, of course, start as we always do by acknowledging that this is Indigenous people's land that we sit on here. And we acknowledge that every opportunity we get. And we don't just say that, we really make a strong effort to educate our people on a consistent basis and have done so for decades about this question, and help the Indigenous people whatever way they ask us to help them build capacity to organize and get their lands back. So we acknowledge them all the time in that effort. And we also, of course, acknowledge our African ancestors who have been subjected to some of the worst disrespect and ungratefulness known to human civilization and uncivilization. But we stand here today to say that we honor, respect, and love our ancestors, and we see every step that we take today as a direct consequence of their contribution and sacrifice to allow us to exist. So we're thankful that you join us for this program today, the political strategy behind the Black on Black crime narratives. What are these people trying to do? Of course, Black on Black crime is a thing. We'll talk about that. But what's really going on behind this constant narrative that particularly the political right and even the bourgeois liberal establishment is constantly shoving down our throats? What's that about? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And we'll just start with our introductions as we always do. Our Ancestors Voices is a program sponsored each Sunday at the same time by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party, which is based in Africa. And our objective, what we are fighting for, is Pan-Africanism, which we define correctly as one unified socialist Africa. Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa. We believe that this objective of Pan-Africanism is a core ingredient towards making the contribution to eliminate the suffering that African people face, 2 billion of us scattered in almost 120 countries worldwide because of colonialism and slavery. And we also believe that this contribution be our contribution to the worldwide struggle for justice and humanity for all of oppressed civilization. So we ask folks to look at the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which was written by Kwame Nkrumah in 1968. You see the front of it on your screen if you're looking at a screen. This is our playbook for achieving Pan-Africanism. This is how we intend to do it. And he outlines in there the strategy to unite all revolutionary Pan-African formations on the ground, fighting for the objective of one unified socialist Africa. And here today and every week sponsoring this particular AAPRP program, Our Ancestors' Voices, is myself, Ajamu Umi, and my biological and ideological daughter, Shakura Umi. We are both active organizers for the AAPRP. And so, as we always do on this critical topic of the political narratives of Black on Black crime, or the political strategy behind the Black on Black crime narrative, I will turn it over to Shakura to get us started.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Greetings, everyone. We hope that you continue to be safe and well. So, of course, just reminding folks that we are still asking for donations for African Liberation Day 2023. You are more than welcome to send your donations to www.abetterworld.me, www.abetterworld.me. Thank you again to those who have already been donating. As we've said before, we have numerous bills that need to be paid to ensure that this event and other events, virtual and in person, are able to be supported financially. That ranges from speaker fees to having money to pay for hospitable items such as beverages and nourishment for the speakers that are coming in person. For the virtual spaces, we have Zoom membership fees that need to be paid as webinars are being broadcasted. We have translator fees. We have different translators because, as we know, our people are spread all over the world and have been colonized by numerous different European countries. And so we have Spanish and Portuguese, we have French translators and things of that nature. We also, in some cases, need to pay for the space that the event is being held itself. And so, again, we ask that you continue to donate. Thank you so much. And, keep in mind that we are also putting our money where our mouth is. We actually, in the party, we have our ALD tax that's coming up just this weekend. Actually, it's due on the 15th. So not only are we asking you to do something that we ourselves would not do, but we're asking you to continue doing it, because we always say that we want to support African businesses. Well, we're not a business, and we're proud to say that we're not, because we don't support capitalism by any means. But we are of the mindset that we want to free Mother Africa as well as her children. And so because of that, ALD is one of the vessels that we use to do that. And we rely on ALD greatly to do that, because African Liberation Day does just that. It connects Africans all over the world and reminds us of why Africa needs to be free. So with that, we ask that you consider donating and make sure that you share that link with your friends. Ask them to get involved as well. So on this topic of African on African crime, let's dig a little bit deeper into the very system that I was just alluding to. So how does capitalism, white supremacy, and media play in to African on African crime and the stats that we have come to be familiar with? Well, I think it's important that we continue to think in great detail about just what is capitalism and why does that have a component into this idea of how we define this overall tainted system where data is being collected based on a system that is inhumane. So keep in mind that capitalism is a system literally designed to protect and promote private entities to continue making profit regardless of any barriers that can get in the way. These private entities are able to continue making that profit by any means necessary, which means they may in some cases be inhumane. They may in other cases strip people of their identities. They may in some cases even murder or kill people, rape as well. But the objective is above all else to maintain profit making, no matter what. And so now that we know what capitalism is, what are some examples of private corporations? Well, you have Fox, you have BBC, you have MSNBC. These are all different examples of private corporations. Now, what does media have to do with this? Because we know that white supremacy continues to push that narrative down our throat, that there is this assumption that Africans should be criminalized, right? We have all these assumptions and stereotypes that are associated with us. We don't know how to talk to people. We're inhumane. We are vicious. We're criminals. We don't know how to be trusted. For those of us that can bear children, we don't know how to control ourselves. So we have numerous children with numerous different people. We can't afford things. Our credit is bad. Like, we have all these stereotypes that are going into that. based on these white supremacy standards that have been set. But who is enforcing the standards? Well, that would be media, because the people who own these private corporations are also in favor of white supremacy. Why? Because it benefits them. So not only do they have control to sell us whatever information and message they want us to have, they have the determining factors of how that message is crafted. They have the determining factors of how often that message is being disseminated and broadcasted. They also have determining factors to decipher how they want the message to be said, even if it means dehumanizing us every single time, no matter what. Actually, the objective is to not only dehumanize us, but to ensure that we don't achieve any humanity whatsoever, because achieving humanity would actually kind of be the counter argument to us having all those stereotypes. You can't have a humane person who has bad credit, right? The two have to be opposite. You can't have a humane person that deserves to be treated with respect. This is why African lives don't matter, right? And so I think it's important to think about how the three of these components really link up in terms of making things very, very difficult for us. So we know that capitalism continues to privatize and protect those private corporations at the hands of people. And we also know that white supremacy sells the notion that anyone who is not in favor of white supremacy, then they need to be stopped, because that means that they're not in favor of maintaining the status quo. And in this case, the status quo would be maintaining that Africans are subdue, Africans are lower than dirt, Africans don't matter, Africans are not deserving of full respect, Africans are inhumane, we don't have what it takes to be successful, we're not dedicated, we don't have discipline, like all of these things that are going into these stereotypes. And so I just want to continue to highlight that that's where those messages come from. And it's very hard for us to push back against those messages because we ourselves enforce them. We talked a long time ago, as we've done numerous seminars on patriarchy, and we talk about how non-male people can promote patriarchy just as badly as male people. Well, it would be the same thing with Africans promoting white supremacy. It would be the same thing with Africans promoting stereotypes that make Africans look bad. And we don't even realize that we are promoting those, or maybe sometimes we do. So we can think of some examples where maybe if you're walking in a store and you see another African person coming up to you, maybe you instinctively grab your purse and you don't even think about the fact that you grab it. Or maybe you think potentially about the fact that you could be in harm's way when you see other people of color on the sidewalk and you're walking by them. It could also be something as subtle as maybe you work in some type of retail. And when you see an African person or a person of color coming up to purchase something, you have to kind of make decisions in your head about whether or not, first of all, you probably make assumptions about how they're going to pay for it. And then you also might make assumptions about whether or not those forms of payment will be efficient and effective, right? And so like just thinking more about that and highlighting that and then finding a way to resist it and to unlearn it, I think is going to be critical, because that's where we have to come to understand that these private corporations, they don't have to tell the truth. They can continue to promote lies about us because there's not enough organizing factors in place to resist the lies. There's not enough organizing factors in place to let folks know that that message from that media outlet, it should be resisted. It should be terminated. We should protest it. We don't have enough muscle power and people power to be able to do that, because we can take over Fox, but all of us would have to understand that we cannot let Fox win. And that means that we cannot support Fox. We can't make sure that we have cable packages that have Fox. We want to make sure that we're not using other systems that are in cahoots with Fox, because a lot of these organizations are linked up. And so I think that's going to be really critical in thinking about that. They benefit from telling the world lies about us. That's how private corporations continue to make their money, especially if they're centered in white supremacy. It would not behoove them to tell the truth about us, because people who tell the truth are not considered attractive in this world. It's not humane to do the right thing, and it's not cool to do the right thing. It's more cooler for you to treat people with disrespect and to diss them. This is why when you see people who are standing next to you holding up a sign on the street corner because they're shelterless, unfortunately, we've been programmed to say, well, they should have done better. They should have saved more money. Why didn't they do better to save more money? They knew that they were living paycheck to paycheck, right? We don't really think about how really delicate that situation is, and how, if you really think about it, all of us are one paycheck from being on the streets. Like, if you really think about it, because this is an inhumane system, and all of us could lose our job at any point in time. But we don't think about that, because, as my grandmother used to say, if you give an African a nickel above bus fare, then you can't tell him nothing, right? And so we have to just, we have to humble ourselves, first of all. Second of all, we have to join organizations that are working for justice, and we have to increase our political education, because the more books you read, the more you will start to understand this is not a new problem. This is a problem that has been around since the beginning of time. And I was also going to say, and it's a problem that is centered on Africa being oppressed. That's the biggest key point of this. And so again, because Africa has been oppressed since the beginning of our conception of understanding that white supremacy has taken over. And from the moment that those European countries started dividing up our mother Africa, that's when things started to go downhill from us. That's also where a lot of the messages started being crafted about how we're lazy and we don't have dedication and we're not disciplined and all these things. And those narratives have been recycled. They've been passed on through their biology and family, just like our narratives have been passed on. And so these private corporations don't benefit from telling the truth. And we need to remember that, because it's going to be up to us to understand that we have to push harder against things that are not true, based on just what we look like, based on our background, based on our income, based on all of these things. And so thinking about that in more context is going to be critical, because as I said, they don't benefit for telling us the truth, and they don't benefit for telling society the truth. They also don't benefit from actually being truthful about what messages they're sending out. And so again, trusting capitalism is not a good system. Okay, that's a setup for failure if you do that. And we need to understand that there's going to be more involved with it, where we're going to have to think a little bit more critically, which is why joining an organization will help. Next slide, please. So on the same note of joining an organization, again, you all, it's so difficult to unpack all of the hypocrisy and the mistruths on your own. And even if you got all the books on the reading list for work study, or maybe you have a different political education reading list, you still would need someone else to really dig into these topics yourself with. And so this is why we encourage you all to join organizations that are working for justice, because you have to talk this stuff out. Keep in mind that we have been living in a system that is inhumane for many, many years. For some of us, going on 80, 90, 100 years old. And so that's 100 years of trying to unlearn a system that teaches us that we should get comfortable disrespecting other people just because of how much money they make. And in some cases, because of how much money they make, because of what their gender identification is, and because of whether or not they're differently abled, whether or not they are queer identifying, whether or not they identify as African or indigenous or Asian. Like, there's so many intersections that justify why it's okay to treat people badly. It's gross and disgusting. So we got to think a little bit more about that, because joining an organization that's working for justice is going to give you tools, and it's going to arm you to be prepared, not only with ways to resist that narrative that gets pushed down your throat, but also to highlight the contradictions of it, and to look at some better examples of socialist environments that are not based on dehumanization, and how they function just fine, contrary to what capitalist media is teaching us. So just moving right along, we continue on by thinking about how we're going to have to do more to push back against that. As I said before, these messages have been crafted since the 1400s and the 1500s, when Europeans were planning how they were going to go in. Before the Berlin Conference even got organized, people were thinking about ways to colonize Africa. And so from there, these messages started being formed, and they started being repeated over time. I think about there's a specific chapter in my dissertation where I'm talking about Marion Sims, and how this was the only obstetrician gynecologist at that time who was servicing plantation owners, because obviously slaves would get sick and would need OBGYN care. And he was the only one who could service it, because he was the only one who specialized in it. And how he would keep his notes just talking about how non-African people, non-male African people have so much pain, maintenance. They manage pain so well. And it's because of him. It's because of him and his stupidity that we have conceptions now and lies and misconceptions about non-African people having higher pain tolerances. I mean, this is where that stuff starts, you all. But this guy did research unethically for 4 years in Alabama and North Carolina and Tennessee and other parts of the South. And so these narratives started growing. And you know, he went to doctor conferences and talked about his stupid research. And other doctors were like, oh, that's good. They have a high pain tolerance. And that's where it comes from. So now when you go to the doctor tomorrow with your partner who is a non-male African person, and the doctor says you should be able to handle this thing inside of you when it clearly is causing them pain, that's where that comes from. So we need to push back against that. We need to increase our political education so that we can know not only is that rhetorical BS on top of that, but we also have a way to navigate through that because we understand where the BS stems from. We understand that it's coming from white supremacy. We understand that it's coming from dehumanization. We understand that it is coming from a capitalist frame. We understand that. And if we understand that, then surely we should be able to then resist it, unpack it, figure out a way to take it down, and then approach it from a socialist standpoint. Because we still would need services such as an OBGYN and a socialist environment, but clearly there would be a more humane approach to that. But we're going to have to take responsibility for that. And the biggest step is we're going to have to understand that capitalism is not set up to help us in any way, shape, or form, which in my opinion means we need to release the idea that voting is the answer, because that is not a system that is beneficial if the system itself is still dehumanizing people. I said it before and I'll say it again. If you are a gardener and you have bad soil, it doesn't matter how many different plants you buy, they will all die because your soil is bad. Capitalism is the soil, you all, and it is a horrible, horrible system that is literally killing people and not thinking twice just because they don't have enough money to pay for health insurance or they don't have enough money to get another job, so they deserve to die. This happens every single day. We know that. It happens every single day. So what we are arguing is that the soil itself needs to be changed. That's why we're saying to burn everything down and to start from scratch. The best way to do that, though, is to increase our political education and to join an organization that's working for justice. I would also add, in addition to joining an organization, getting more involved in community events. That's another thing that the AAPRP is working on, is we don't just want to have people in meetings. We want to have us actually doing community events where we are taking the theory of political education and then practicing it in the community. We don't just have to talk about Kwame Nkrumah every day, walking on the sidewalks. We can incorporate some of Nkrumah's practices by building a breakfast program or by building a health clinic that offers free mammograms to people 40 and up. There's different ways that we can navigate that, especially if we know what type of cancers are highly more prevalent in the African community or in the indigenous community and the Asian descent community. We can find a way to navigate that because those need to be things that we look out for. So join an organization working for justice, increase your political education. Please support for African Liberation Day with www.abetterworld.me. And remember that it is up to you to stop trusting capitalism. And that's going to take some time. I understand that. We understand that. But we can't take too much time to do it, though, because trusting capitalism has really put us in a deep hole. And so now we need to pull out of that hole and to figure out a way to build a whole based on humanity and socialism so that we can equip ourselves to continue taking the system down. Ashe.
Ashe, Ashe. Thank you, Shakura. Obrigada for that. And as Shakur said, just want to reiterate again, a couple of things, the question of community involvement. So those of you that hopefully are listening here in the Sacramento, California area, this is Miwok land. So that's how we identify it. It's Miwok land, but what they call Sacramento, California. We're going to have a number of things that we'll start putting on the slide going forward. We're going to start some political education self-defense classes indoors. We have a spot starting on April 25th. So we will have that information available next Sunday. And all are invited. If you stand for justice, you're invited to these political education classes. And then also we're going to be supporting, if you hadn't heard, the aggressive, brutal brutes of Zionist Israel have attacked a sacred Islamic masjid in the area of Gaza in occupied Palestine, what they call Israel. And so we are joining with other organizations here in Sacramento to educate the public about what's going on there. So if you're in this area next Friday, this coming Friday, I think it's the 14th, at 4:30 on the corner of J Street and 16th, where the Memorial Auditorium is. For those of you who know this area, we will be out there with the other organizations educating about this terrible oppression and terrorism that's continually carried out against the Palestinian people. And then again, African Liberation Day. Those of you, a lot of you are donating. We really appreciate it. Shakur gave you the reasons why we fund our programs on the ground throughout the African continent with your donations. So please continue to donate. It's there on the screen at betterworld.me. Donate whatever you can. It all helps, and we appreciate it. And you're making a contribution. You know, you have these shows on TV talking about help Africa, and that money, 90% of it is not even coming anywhere close to Africa. And whatever money they raise from you that does go to Africa, it's doing nothing to contribute to the self-determination of the African masses. We guarantee you, whatever you contribute to the All-African People's Revolutionary Party is immediately going on the ground to help build African dignity and self-determination. So continue to donate there. Then people don't ask you to donate on TV, and then once you donate, they stop asking you. They continue to ask you. So we're fighting for justice. We're fighting against them. So we have to continue to ask you too. So please contribute if you have. Thank you very much. Please continue. And then we're just going to dissect the entire concept of this black on black crime narrative that's out here all the time. And you see on the screen, I have a picture of the so-called Lord's Resistance Army that was operational several years ago in Uganda, carrying out terror against the people. You could talk about Boko Haram, who has performed that to a degree here and across the world. You have a number of organizations who have engaged in activity that would have to rightfully be defined as harmful to the African masses from people who exist within our African communities. So we want to dissect all of that. And we want to start by just talking about briefly, even the Department of Injustice. If you start with this backward country, so-called Department of Justice, we call it Injustice. They have research. They put out reports every year. And I understand in the United States of America, you know, read is a dirty four-letter word. I get it. But we still have to rely on, we have to really struggle to help people understand how to learn how to research, because just looking up an article on the internet is not doing research, especially if you don't even know who wrote the article and what their agenda is behind writing it. You're not doing research, you're being propagandized. So we want to constantly promote this concept of developing our critical analysis skills and research. And so one of the ways that we want to bring that to you is talking about the Department of Injustice has research. They do it every year. And they talk about crime statistics. That's all it is. It's every kind of crime statistic you can imagine. And so let's first express that one of the things that comes out of that report every year is demographics on killings among ethnic groups. And if you look it up, you'll see that African people are killed by other African people 91% of the times. In other words, 9 out of 10 Africans that are killed, murdered, are killed by another African. But at the same time, 88% of indigenous Latino people who are killed by another indigenous Latino person. This is according to these people's statistics. 86% of Asian people that are killed, murdered, are killed by other Asian people, right? And 87% of Europeans, white people, that are killed by other white people. So what does that tell you? You have a variance of about 4 or 5%. And in social science context, if you study and you understand social science, a 4 or 5% variance on something like this is considered negligible, meaning it's not even enough to be considered something that represents a legitimate difference. So in other words, what social science would say about these stats is that people who people of specific ethnic groups typically live among primarily people of the same ethnic group, typically date and interact with people among the same ethnic group. And as a result, typically kill people of the same ethnic group. That's what that tells you from a social science standpoint. And there's no real question about that. And then I would argue, if you factor in the conditions of colonialism, slavery, and what we have experienced by destroying our self-esteem and our dignity, attempting to anyway, over the last 500 plus years, for me, it's amazing that the variance is only 4 or 5% from all the other ethnic groups. I would have thought it would have been a lot higher, especially based on how these people propagandize the effort. So let's just start there by saying that there really isn't any concept of black on black crime that stands above any other group killing each other. White on white crime, yellow on yellow crime, brown on brown crime, red on red crime. There really isn't any special characteristic about black on black crime that makes it more noteworthy than what any other ethnic group is doing among their own ethnic group to take the lives of those folks. Let's establish that scientifically that's true. And then on top of that, we can say that it's also true that they will talk about, well, African people commit more crimes, but you don't know that. They say the same thing in Azania. They say the same thing in Zimbabwe. They say the same thing in Britain. They say the same thing in Canada. African people commit more crimes, but you don't know that. All you know is that African people get arrested and convicted for more crimes. No argument with you there. We certainly get arrested and convicted more than European people. No argument there whatsoever. But that does not mean that we commit more crimes. That doesn't mean anything close to that. What it does mean is what the European activist said, the youth European activist said, when he talked about how growing up in a high income suburban neighborhood, his public high school was full of drugs. It was full of people carrying guns to school. It was full of illegal activity. But he acutely noted that the difference is the police were not targeting them. They didn't even see the police. A lot of times they knew the police. The police were part of their family. The police knew there was illegal activity. They lived in that community and they never targeted them. They never arrested them because they knew the parents. They would just report it to the parents if they even bothered to do that. Whereas in our communities, you all know we're targeted, we're harassed, we're constantly attacked around these issues. So anyone knows when you look for a problem like that in a backward society like this, you're going to find it. So we're targeted. So we're certainly arrested and convicted more often. No question about that. But to say that we commit more crimes than other people, that's just a bold-faced lie. So let's just start there and then go on to the point that, considering all the years we've had of this naked barbarism against us, again, it's just really amazing that the variance is only 4 or 5%, because we are in a place where, as Malcolm X said, and this is on YouTube, you should look it up. It's entitled, "Who Are We?" And Malcolm says, who are we? Where did we come from? And he talks about that, and you should know that. He says, what name did we have? Our name couldn't have been Smith or Bunch or Powell. That's not our name. They don't have those kind of names where you and I came from. No, what was your name? And why don't you now know what your name is? Where is your land? Who took it? How did he take it? How did the man take your land from you, your language? He says, and then he says, what did the man do to make you as dumb as you are right now? In that little passage, and I totally messed it up. I know it, but for some reason I can't remember it because I'm trying to remember the points I want to make for this program right now. But you get the point of what Malcolm is saying, is that we have been completely robbed and stripped of a knowledge of who we are as African people. And so considering that, the fact that we are only 4 or 5 points different from how Europeans and other people kill themselves is utterly amazing, because nobody has stripped the identity and knowledge of self from European people. And yet they kill each other at as consistent a rate as anybody else. So this is a point that needs to be made so that we can break down further this backward narrative. And we'll just keep going, because we know from Soweto Azania to South Los Angeles here in indigenous land here in the Western Hemisphere, our problems are clearly the result of the exploitation of Africa for the last 530 years. I don't care where you are. If you're African, your problems are connected to the exploitation of Africa. It doesn't matter whether you've never seen Africa. It doesn't matter if you don't even know how to spell Africa. Your problems are connected to the exploitation of Africa, because this wealth that has been created and sustained by Western capitalism has been sustained by robbing and stealing from Africa. So they know that in order for them to maintain that wealth, obviously a fifth grader could understand they have to ensure that they keep the African masses down to ensure that they can maintain that exploitation of Africa's human and material resources. And by keeping the African masses down, I mean, they have to keep us down physically. Thus, you see the constant barrage of weapons that are dropped into the communities where we live, whether it's South LA or Soweto, whether it's Port-au-Prince or Philadelphia. This is true. And they also have to attack us psychologically and spiritually. And this is done by attacking our humanity and stressing that something is wrong with us and that we kill each other more than, you know, I watched this video, I've seen it a number of times, of Dr. Khalid, the late Dr. Khalid Muhammad. And he was talking about this question, and some European from the military was on the TV, and he was saying, well, why are people from Haiti trying to get here? And Khalid talked about, he just broke down how the system works. You know, they terrorize Haiti, and certainly they've done that since 1804, since the Haitian Revolution. They've terrorized capitalism and imperialism led by the United Snakes of America. Has terrorized Haiti. And so people are just trying to get away to get safety and security for their family. They're not leaving because they believe the lie about American democracy. That's not what that's about. Because if you make that argument, then the minute the lights go out in any city here in the United States of America, what happens? If the lights go out for any period of time, people go and start looting, right? That's documented. Nobody can question that. When New York had a power outage in 2003, people were in the streets looting. Within an hour, they were looting all over New York City. So if you take that argument about Haiti, then you have to say that, well, people are looting here because they don't respect and like the United States of America. And those people that support the United States of America would never agree with it. They come up with all kinds of reasons. Well, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, then there's certainly nuances and variances to any approach to this type of analysis. But our point is that the point that's not refutable is that African people are oppressed because Africa is exploited. And then also never discount the role of police in sabotaging our communities. You know, everybody knows about the crack cocaine in Los Angeles in the 1980s and how that was proliferated because the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, or we call them criminals in action, they set up a network to allow crack cocaine to be sold in LA. And a lot of those proceeds were used to fund the Contras, the illegal army that was put together by US imperialism to try to overthrow the democratically elected government in Nicaragua, the Sandinistas. So this is historically what has happened. So we can't dismiss the role of police in creating sabotage and instability in our communities. And then we also, you know, we talked about the white activists and never forgetting what they said about which communities are targeted, because that speaks loudly to why communities have higher incarceration rates, more violence, a lot of those things. And we should contextualize this question of more violence by talking about this cracker you see on the screen. His name is Mickey Windecker, and he was a paid FBI informant in Denver, Colorado, after George Floyd was killed. If you recall, in 2020, during the height of the COVID pandemic, there were protests all over this country and all over the world, actually, right? And Denver, Colorado had the development of a Black Lives Matter movement that developed. Now, the important thing to state about that is a lot of the people, you know, Black Lives Matter itself as a movement only started in 2014. So it's really only 7 years old. And every time the police terrorize these police terrorists, kill one of our people, more and more people come into this type of movement. And so you're talking about people who are young. That's a beautiful thing. You're talking about people who are inexperienced in political organizing. That's understandable. But because of that, you're talking about a people who can be easily manipulated. And I've seen it myself in organizing circles many times. So the FBI has seen it too, because they pay attention. They pay closer attention than most of us, because that's their job, is to sabotage our work. So in Denver, Colorado, what they did here in the United States is they hired this criminal, this psychopath, and they paid him to infiltrate the Black Lives Matter movement in Denver, Colorado. Now, the point I want to make about him before moving on here is that he was quickly able to advance to the top of the leadership in Black Lives Matter in Denver. And this is not, again, a knock against anybody in Denver. I know Black Lives Matter activists in Colorado. I know them. I've actually gone out there and done some revolutionary training for them. So I know some of them. They're wonderful people. But the fact that, you have organizations that we have that don't have, a strong political education process. This is why you have a reality where someone like this could easily rise to the top of an organization very fast. I mean, that's not just against Black Lives Matter. William O'Neill rose in the ranks of the Illinois Black Panther Party very fast, and he was an FBI informant. George Sams rose in the ranks of the Connecticut Black Panther Party. He was an FBI informant. This has been a problem all over the world. We can talk about Ghana, Guinea, all of the places where this has happened. It was agents of imperialism that assassinated Amilcar Cabral in Guinea-Conakry. It wasn't the Portuguese. They didn't pull the trigger. They bought the bullets. So this is just one of the challenges that we have in organizing our work. And this person rose to the leadership and began to advocate acts of violence. And I'm making this point because this is a phenomenon all over the world where police are the ones instigating the violence, and then they show it to you on TV and you see it and they have a commentary, Black Lives Matter is violent, Antifa's violent, and you don't know anything about, you've never been to a Black Lives Matter protest, or if you went, you didn't know what was going on, you didn't know who organized it, you didn't know anything about it, you don't even know what Antifa means, you don't even know what it means anti-fascist, you don't know anything about that. And so they tell you that on TV and you're like, oh yeah, those protests are violent. And all that means at the end of the day is that you're empty-headed, there's cotton rattling around in your head, and you don't have critical analysis skills to understand that you're being played like a fiddle by the capitalist system. So that's why we say, who does this backward narrative benefit about Black on Black crime? And the answer is it benefits the capitalist system. And the reason why we say that is that they are effectively able to convince us, so many of us, that we are the cause of all our problems. They talk about cities like Chicago. Well, look at all the killing in Chicago. And you don't have a critical lens to look at that. So you're not looking at the fact that I guarantee you, I would bet you money that a lot of the violence in Chicago is precipitated by police. A lot of the violence in LA is precipitated by police. A lot of the violence in Soweto is precipitated by police. A lot of the violence in London is precipitated by police, because the police, their role is, first off, when they create these gang task force, if there's no gang activity, guess what? Their department goes away. So they have a built-in incentive to ensure that gang violence continues to take place. And this is even portrayed in so many motion pictures that I can't even name all of them. I mean, so you gotta realize in 2023 that this is a reality. No question about that. And because it's a reality, we don't want to hear nothing about Chicago. We know the Africans in Chicago don't have one there's no gun manufacturing facility in Chicago. How did the guns get in there? Your argument is that these criminals have guns. That's their argument. So how do these criminals get guns? They can't. There has to be a pretty sophisticated network that allows this many guns to get into a community. How do they get that? How do they get the ammo? How do they get all that? How do they operate like that? I say this, I have never taken a puff of weed in my entire life. I'm 61 years old. I've never done it. Never wanted to do it and never will do it. Nothing against people to do. I just don't need it in my life. I've never done any kind of drugs. Don't drink alcohol. I could, right now, we could stop this program in this city. I could even come to your city, even if I don't know your city, I've never been there before. And within an hour, I guarantee you, I could find where meth is sold. I could find where all kind of illegal drugs are sold in your city, even if I've never been there. So you tell me, because I'm a conscious human being, how the hell can I do that? And you could do it too. And the police don't know, can't stop the drug. I mean, you got to be a damn fool if you haven't figured out what I just explained to you. Like, this is a game that they're playing to perpetuate their agenda. That's all it is. So don't talk to us about Chicago. We don't want to hear that. Only an idiot wants to listen to that. And oh, well, yeah, they're right. Look at Chicago. No, look at how I can shine a flashlight in one of your ears and read a book on the other side. Look at that, because that's what we got to correct. So once they convince us that we are the problem, we can never step into our rightful place as leaders on the planet Earth. Long as these people convince us, and by these people, I mean the capitalist system, that the reason why we suffer is because of ourselves and that we're the source of our problem. Or I'll say it better. Kwame Ture said it better when he said, we can never understand the problems we face without including the enemy in our analysis. So anytime I hear, because he's 100% correct, anytime I hear some fool talking about, well, we killing each other, we kill each other, and that's it. That's their analysis. Or we selling drugs to each other. Or our women, they cause their own problem with their attitude. Anytime I hear some kind of fool talking like that, I know that that's a damn fool that simply needs to be nurtured and given correct political education so that they can graduate beyond the aspect of being a damn fool into a functioning, thinking, feeling, developing human being. That's what that means. Because no analysis like that is ever going to give you a correct understanding of the problem unless you include the enemy. And our enemy is the capitalist imperialist network led by the United Snakes of America. That's our enemy. So as long as we believe them and only think that the problem is because of us, we'll never be able to step out of this hole that they've dug for us and continue to dig for us. And as long as we continue to believe them and behave as they wish, that allows them freedom to continue to develop their system of exploitation, stealing our resources every day to do it. While we sit around trying to figure out how to piece two nickels together, they're stealing all our gold, all our diamonds, all our uranium, all our bauxite, all our coltan, all our manganese, all of our steel, our zinc, all of that. They're stealing it. Our rubber, our cocoa, we have nothing except two nickels. And as long as we stay in that place they've got us in, that'll always be the case. And they can continue to sabotage us under this type of system, like the example I gave you in Denver, which I guarantee you is a widespread example right down the street from you. It's happening where police are sabotaging any and all efforts to organize communities for justice against this system. The police are involved. You think when we say COINTELPRO that, well, we're talking about something that happened in the 60s and 70s. No, we're talking about the US capitalist empire strategy for destabilizing movements for justice. Whether we're talking about 1969 or 2069, it's the same system where they come in and they sabotage our efforts to unite people so that we can overthrow their vicious and backward system. So, we ask you again, because El Haj Malik, El Shabazz, Malcolm X, and many of our other ancestors for justice, they have the formula for helping us understand what we need to do. So here, I'm going to read it. Malcolm says, there can be no black-white unity until there is first black unity. We cannot think of uniting with others until after we have first united among ourselves. We cannot think of being acceptable to others until we have first proven acceptable to ourselves. Now, does that statement mean we don't like white people? Of course it doesn't mean that. What it means is that we have suffered 530 years of colonialism. And the only way we can be of any good to anybody is we first have to acknowledge that and engage in the work to rectify that situation, because that 530 years has institutionalized a system of dehumanization against us. It's taught us to hate ourselves. And when I say hate ourselves, any African you see denying Africa hates themselves. As Marcus Mosiah Garvey said, you cannot love the tree if you hate the roots. It's just not possible, you all. Any African who doesn't know anything about Africa, who has never taken the time to study anything about Africa, hates themselves. It's objective. You cannot love yourself because you don't even know who the hell you are. You running around here trying to imitate what they told you you need to be. It's just objective. That's all there is to it. It's not saying you're a bad person. It's just objective. That's what Malcolm is talking about. Any African that's talking about how light-skinned African talking about dark-skinned one, dark-skinned African talking about light-skinned ones, that's because we hate ourselves. All of us hate ourselves. There's no question about that. That's the beauty of being free and having liberated thinking. When you understand and accept the reality that we're faced with. I don't have any problem saying that. I recognize how I've spent my whole life battling the self-hatred of colonialism within myself. I have no problem saying that. That's why I'm proud right now and have a strong perception of myself, because I've done that work. And we have to do that work. And most of that work I've done within the work study process of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. The other part of that work, propelled by that, I've done on my own with counseling, therapy, and all of that. And combined, those elements have made me a very strong person with an extremely positive self-esteem, but I still struggle. So I know you do. So this is what Malcolm is talking about. We have to deal with that before we can do anything else. And it's not like one or the other or one against the other. We do that work while we build with other people who are not African and support their struggle, and they support our struggle. And the best way we can support their struggle is by engaging in our own struggle and educating our own people about their struggle while we do it. That's all we're saying. It's irrefutable that that makes sense, but that's what Malcolm was talking about when he was talking. And so organized revolutionary political education is the absolute best medicine for us to create a positive image of ourselves. If we don't have that, there's no way we can do that. The best we can do is just sit here and be caricatures of what our master wants us to be. And then through processes like this, organized political education, we begin to learn how to believe and encourage ourselves. And by doing that, we learn how to respect others. And that's when we start on the pathway to building a healthy society. We don't have that now, but we can get that. That's how we do it. That's exactly how we do it. And then this positive turnabout breaks down their system, because their system relies on us hating ourselves. So the more that we reject that and begin to believe in ourselves, the weaker their system gets. And the weaker their system gets, the closer we get to victory. Closer we get to victory. And once we institutionalize these values on a mass level, there's nothing they're going to be able to do, you all, to stop us. There's nothing they're going to be able to do. Think about it, if we had a mass consciousness where you were in one organization, you were in the Uhuru movement, you were in the Black Alliance for Peace, you were in the Party for Socialism and Liberation, you were in whatever organization it is, and they came to you and they said, those people in that AAPRP are the problem. And you told them, yeah, okay, thanks for the information. And then after they left, you told your comrades and your people, look, that is an example of what we don't listen to. You know, whatever they said about the APRP, we'll raise that with them and we'll talk to them, because we respect the work they do like they respect the work we do. And so we're not going to be pulled into no sabotage against our movement for justice. Imagine if that was what was happening, where we would be, as opposed to where we are right now, where anybody can come to you, somebody you don't even know, and they can say, you know, Jamu, Shakura, they're not really real. You know, well, why are they not real? Well, because, you know, I just think that they're stealing money And a lot of you out here would believe this is what you would do. You wouldn't come to me and Shakur because you don't have that kind of integrity. Instead, you would go to somebody else's. That program, Our Ancestor Voices, that AAPRP, they steal people's money. That's what I was told. That's what a lot of you would do. That's where we are right now. That's what we have to build up from and get out of that nonsense place. So that's what this political education process does for us. And the minute we realize that, the closer we'll get to eliminating all of these problems that keep us from moving forward. So we want to thank you for joining us today. And we want to invite you back next week when we have, on April 16th, our topic will be the unknown radical Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We're going to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from a radical perspective, far beyond I have a dream, but who Dr. King was in 1968 and why him being who he was in 1968 was the catalyst that caused this backward government to take his life. They'll give you a holiday. They don't care about that because they know you're not going to follow up and build on the work he was doing. That's all they care about. They'll give you a holiday. They'll give you 2 holidays. Long as you don't build on his work, that's all they care about. So if they got to give you a holiday, they'll do it. And somebody asked me, well, do you think we'll ever get reparations? And I said, well, if all it is getting a check, yeah, they'll do that. If we start tearing these cities down enough, they'll give you a check. But that's not reparations. That's the problem. We think a check, I don't care how much a check could be for $5 million. It's still not reparations. How you gonna get back 500 years of psychological and physical terror against your people? How can you put a price tag on that? I mean, only a complete sellout and a fool would put a price tag on that. Someone who knows nothing about our history. So we want you to know that and know the real Dr. King. And then African Liberation Day is approaching, and we have there a beautiful picture of many of us here for the Oakland African Liberation Day, the last one we had on the ground, 2019. We plan on doing it again this year and doing them in a lot of places around the world, as we mentioned. Contribute to that, please. But we want to ask you we want to build a campaign. So take a picture with you in some white clothes, a sign that says African Liberation Day 2023, and send it into that address there, that email address. That's a simple ask. I don't care what nationality you are, just do it. This is how we build capacity. uhuruliterature@gmail.com. Send your pictures there. uhuruliterature@gmail.com. Put on some white clothes as a symbol of international unity. Have something that says African Liberation Day 2023. Take a picture and send it there. We're trying to get as many pictures as we possibly can. African Liberation Day is next month. So please support that. Go to our Forward Ever shop. Go to aprp-intl.org. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go to abetterworld.me. Contribute to African Liberation Day 2023. Please do that as much as you can, as often as you can. Read the Hood Communist Collective, www.hoodcommunist.org, Revolutionary African Perspective. It is a wonderful thing. And if you don't support it, who's going to support it? The neo-Nazis? I mean, we ain't got nothing. Well, it starts with what you're supporting. So support Hood Communists. Support anything independent and revolutionary. That's what we should be doing. Support all of the programs of the APRP, not just this one. Support all of them because they're all important. And prop up African Liberation Day 2023. Support my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. I wrote that book to give details on how you can do organizing work. That's what we're going to start initiating here in Sacramento under the auspices of the APRP. We're building, we have people, we're building, so we want to do that. So get the book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. Check it out, Google that and get it, buy it, support our struggle for liberation. Have a great rest of your Sunday evening. Forward ever, backwards never. Stay strong, you all. See you next week.